What's going on, guys? It's your boy Nick coming at you today on the channel with a surprise 500 subscriber special upload of Legendary Fisherman, or Umi Control as it's called as well. This is a surprise upload because I wanted to celebrate the fact that I just hit 500 subscribers in the channel, and I honestly couldn't thank you guys enough for all the support and love that I continue to receive from my viewers in the terms of liking my videos, commenting on stuff, and just sharing my stuff. It's been a really great ride, and I cannot believe that I hit 500 subs. It's such a huge milestone, and I'm so grateful for all the support that I've gotten. If you're watching this video right now and you haven't subscribed, I highly encourage you to do so we can reach that next benchmark, which is 1,000 subscribers. We will get there, guys, I promise you that. But for today, I wanted to upload a deck that I helped one of my good friends build, and he's a huge fan of Mako Tsunami from the anime, and he wanted me to help him build a Legendary Fisherman deck. And it just so happened that Umi got new support recently out of the Legendary Duelist Duels from the Deep set, and I was really excited to help him build something that he could like just take to locals and have fun with. Is it a meta deck? Absolutely not. Is it a rogue deck? Possibly, but at the end of the day, it's just something that he can have fun with. And I know that there's a bunch of builds featuring like Ocean Lord or Umi Control that don't play the Fisherman stuff, but I specifically wanted to run the Fisherman cards in this deck, even if it does lower the deck ceiling or consistency, because I had to do it for my boy. He's a huge fan and he wanted to play those cards. And today I bring you a more casual focus build of Legendary Fisherman or Umi Control, however you want to call it. So for those of you that are new to the channel, my name's Nick. We do live duel videos, deck profiles, deck discussions. If those are things that you're interested in, I highly encourage you to hit that subscribe button so we can work our way to our next benchmark, which is 1,000 subs. Again, I can't express how grateful I am for reaching the 500 subscriber benchmark. It's been a hell of a ride, and I can't wait to continue bringing you guys really more amazing deck profiles. So without further ado, we are going to be jumping right into the profile here. And we're going to be starting things off with triple copies of Warrior of Atlantis. Warrior of Atlantis is a really great card, and it's because of the new Legendary Ocean support, he's seen a lot more viability. Basically, you can discard him from the hand to search a Legendary Ocean, so it's just 3 more copies of your field spell, and we'll get into what a Legendary Ocean does when we get to the spell cards, but just understand that a Legendary Ocean for this particular theme is very important, and you want to maintain that card on field as often as you can, so War of Atlantis just helps facilitate that by being 3 additional copies of the spell. Not only that, War of Atlantis has really good stats on his own, being a 1900 level 4 monster, or 2100 under Ocean, since it does buff all water monsters by 200. So triple copies of War of Atlantis to start things off. Then we're moving on to triple copies of Electric Jellyfish. Now this is a brand new card coming out of the Legendary Duelist set I spoke about earlier, and Electric Jellyfish is absolutely insane. He can send an Umi from your deck or face-up field to the graveyard to special summon a water monster from your hand. There is no restriction on that. As long as the water monster in your hand can be special summoned, Electric Jellyfish can special summon it. Not to mention, he also bins a Legendary Ocean from deck to grave. You're probably wondering why that's important. We'll get to that when we get to the trap cards, because there is a trap that can help activate Ocean from grave. But on top of that, while you control a Legendary Ocean, or Umi specifically, sorry, while you control Umi, quick effect, you can negate a monster effect or a spell card or spell effect that your opponent activates. And if you do, increase this card's attack and defense by 600. So this card is a spell negate and a monster negate all in one with literally no cost. All you need to do is control Umi on field. So Electric Jellyfish is a really powerful negate and can just buff himself and continue to become more problematic for your opponent the longer it stays on field. Up next is 2 copies of Ice Knight. Ice Knight is an interesting tech choice that we're running in this list, specifically because it's a water aqua monster who has the ability to give you an additional normal summon of a water monster during your main phase, in addition to your normal summon set, which is extremely important because something that you'll realize as we go through the remaining monsters is the rest of the monsters are level 5 or higher, which means that they're going to be difficult to summon. The cool thing is that Umi, or a Legendary Ocean as it's also called, helps reduce the levels of water monsters in your hand and that you control by 1, making it so that your level 5 monsters can be normal summoned as if they were level 4. But in the event that you don't have access to your field spell, Ice Knight can help facilitate an additional summon, almost like a double summon of sorts. He also has another effect where he gains 400 attack for each aqua monster you control, which does include himself, so he can also get very large, especially when Ocean's on field, because Ocean does give him a stat buff as well. But overall, it's a very cool card, a really cool tech choice, and I just thought it deserves a spot in this particular deck. Moving on, though, we are on triple copies of Ocean Dragon Lord Kairyu Shin. Now, initially, my good friend who I helped build this deck for didn't appreciate this card enough, and, you know, after we started playtesting and I started explaining to him like what this card actually did, and he saw it for himself in practice, this card is undeniably absolutely broken. It is a walking floodgate. While Umi is on the field, each player can only control one face-up non-water monster. If a player controls two or more, they must send some to grave so that they can only control one. So pretty much that effect does not activate. That's just a continuous effect that's there, that applies while this card's on field and Umi's up as well. Think of it like there can be only one, but in monster form. It is extremely difficult to play around this card, and even if you're going second and your opponent has an established board, if you can activate a Legendary Ocean and then normal summon this, because it would be a level 4 monster, they can't respond to this card until they sweep their field first. So, like, it's just nuts. But as if that wasn't bad enough, this card has another effect that allows you to, during your main phase, you can add from the deck to your hand an Umi, a Kairyu Shin spell trap, or one Sea Stealth spell trap. So this card searches a plethora of different spells and traps that help bolster the theme, and this card is just absolutely crucial to the strategy. Not only does it stop your opponent from playing, but it also helps you gain advantage over your opponent, which I really do enjoy. So triple copies of this card, very impressive monster. But moving on to the Fisherman section, we're on triple copies of the Legendary Fisherman 3. Now this card's name becomes the Legendary Fisherman while it's on the field or in the graveyard. Also, if Umi's on the field, this card is unaffected by other monsters' effects. So that's also pretty cool. And then if this face-up card is destroyed by battle or leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect, you can add a level 7 water monster from the deck to your hand. So it's a generic searcher for any level 7 water, which does come up in this particular list when we'll discuss that further as we get into the rest of the monsters. We are playing one copy of the OG Kairyu Shin himself. You can see him here on the playmat. You see him here on the card. This is the only TCG printing of this card, believe it or not. This is a card that existed in the OCG for a long time, but of course you can't play a Fisherman deck without having his manga boss monster, which was the Kairyu Shin. This card is just a vanilla level 5, and we play it because it fits the theme, and we can actually special summon it off of a couple of the spell cards that we main deck. So, moving on, another spicy tech we run is 2 copies of Ice Jade Tremora. This is a level 5 water aqua monster that, as cost, can send itself from the hand to the grave to special summon one water monster from your hand. That's literally all that we use this card for. It does have another effect, but that seldom comes up because we don't really play any other Ice Jades in our deck. This is the only card we run, but this just helps us get our higher level monsters on field without the use of Ocean if we don't have access to it for some reason. So 2 copies of that. Moving on, we are playing the only Legendary Fisherman 3 himself. This card is actually pretty funny. It's difficult for most decks to deal with because it cannot be destroyed by battle or by card effects, and it is also unaffected by spells and trap effects. That kind of protection on a card like this makes it very sticky, meaning that your opponent has a hard time getting it off the board. Also, what makes this card so funny is the summoning requirement. You can special this card from your hand by attributing a Legendary Fisherman that you control. When this card is summoned, you banish all monsters your opponent controls. This card cannot attack the turn you use that effect, but who cares? You literally banish their entire field, and the opponent, like, even if they could respond to this with, like, you know, like negation, like they can't imperm this because it's unaffected by traps. They can't chalice it. They can't droplet it. It's very difficult to deal with this card, and it's just, I love the artwork, and I just think it's a really cool boss monster. Like, once you get this card established, you're pretty much winning that duel. So, 1 copy of Fisherman 3. Keep in mind that Fisherman 2 can search Fisherman 3 when it's destroyed. But moving on to our other level 7s we play, 1 copy of Mega Fortress Whale and 1 copy of Citadel Whale. Mega Fortress Whale is brand new out of the Legendary Duelist theme I told you guys about. While Umi's on the field, you can make it so that water monsters can attack directly this turn. Also, during your opponent's battle phase quick effect, you can target a face-up monster the opponent controls and destroy it. Then if this card is destroyed by a battle or card effect, you can either add to your hand or special summon 1 water warrior monster from your deck or graveyard. So Mega Fortress Whale can help you float into your Fisherman 2, which is pretty cool. A Citadel Whale works a little bit differently. He prevents your cards from being targeted by targeting effects specifically, which is really nice. And when he's summoned, he can actually set a Sea Stealth attack directly from your deck to the field. That is a very important trap that we play in this deck, and we'll get into what that does as we get into the trap card section of the deck. But one copy of each is more than enough, and keep in mind that Fisherman 2 can also search these cards as well if he does get destroyed, which is pretty cool. But that's it for the monsters, guys. Moving on to the spells, triple copy of the field spell itself, a Legendary Ocean. This card is always treated as Umi. Reduce the level of all water monsters in both players' hands and on the field by 1. All water monsters gain 200 attack and defense. This card is absolutely nuts, not because it bolsters your strategy, but because it functions like a pseudo floodgate. This reduces the levels of all water monsters on the field and in both players' hands by 1. Sword Soul, a very prominent deck, still even in the format. They play a lot of waters. All their tokens, which are tuners, are waters. So you reduce the levels of those cards by 1, which makes it very awkward for them to synchro summon and build their board. Decks like Sprite. While the sprites themselves are a water attribute, the frog package that they usually play is. If all their frogs are level 1s, they can't make totally awesome. So things like that is where this card actually shines, in those weird matchups where you think that this card has no value, but it really does. So the fact that we can play triple copies of it is just insane, and like I said, it is the best card in our deck, hands down. Triple copies of Fish Sonar. This card is very good fish support. You know, fish is a theme, or water in general is a theme that kind of gets shafted usually. This card is probably one of the best water support cards I've read in recent memory. You can add a level 7 or lower water monster from your deck to the hand that mentions Umi or is a water normal monster. So if it mentions Umi in the text, you can search this card as long as it's level 7 or lower from deck to hand. Then if Umi is also on the field, you can special summon a water normal monster from your deck. And that's why we played the vanilla copy of Kairyu Shin, because we can actually special the Kairyu Shin off of the Fish Sonar's secondary effect, which is pretty cool, just giving us an additional body on field. But triple copies of that card is absolutely nuts. Now, because we are in Sprite Tier Element format and going second is basically a chore, we have to main deck triple Dark Ruler no more. I mean, this deck, I'll tell you right now, is not playing any hand traps. So because of that, if you're not playing hand traps, then you're playing board breaking cards or go second cards. This card, it sucks that we have to main deck it this format, but it's pretty much the only thing aside from Forbidden Droplet that could deal with a lot of these established boards that those decks set up. So we main deck the Dark Ruler because, again, this deck is very simple in its play strategy. You just want to blank their field, activate Umi, summon Kairyu Shin, and then watch them cry as their entire board gets swept. Next up is 2 copies of Fury of Kairyu Shin. This card's actually really cool. It searches Torrential Tribute from deck to hand. Then, from the graveyard, if a water monster you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can banish this card from your grave instead to protect those cards. That's a non-activated effect. But 2 copies of this literally just searches a copies of Torrential Tribute, which is nice. And then for the last spell, we main deck 1 Sea Stealth 2. This card functions as an additional Umi in the deck. And then also during the battle phase, you can special summon from your hand or graveyard 1 monster that mentions Umi in defense position, but destroy it during the end phase of the turn. Also, this card has a effect where your opponent cannot target water monsters you control with non-water monster effects. So not only is it another Umi that you can play in the deck, but it gives your monsters some targeting immunity and also gives you a Monster Reborn-like effect, which is pretty relevant. That's it for the spells. Moving on to the traps. 2 copies of Sea Stealth Attack, single-handedly the most broken trap I think I've read in a long time. When it's activated, you can activate an Umi from your graveyard or your hand. So it just recurs the field spell. Even if your opponent outs it, you can activate it from grave with this card. Then while Umi's on the field, you gain some effects. First effect is, once per turn, you can banish a water you control until the end phase as cost. This turn, face-up spells and traps you control cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, even if this card leaves the field. So it literally makes it so that your opponent cannot out your spells and traps by means of destruction, which is absolutely insane. Secondary effect is, at the start of the damage step, if your water monster whose original levels 5 or higher battles an opponent's monster, you destroy that opponent's monster. You don't even proceed to damage calculation. As long as your water whose original levels 5 or higher battles into anything, that monster just dies. So that is very annoying, especially since that's not once per turn. So 2 copies of that. Moving on, we're on triple copies of Ice Barrier, another really good water, generic water card. Basically, when an attack is declared involving your opponent's monster, you can change that opponent's monster's attack to 0, negate its effects, and it cannot change its battle position. That is all permanent. You literally blank their effects, non-target, non-destruction, you make their attack 0, and you prevent it from switching battle positions. Also, as if that wasn't crazy enough, the first effect is not once per turn. Also, if that wasn't crazy enough, The graveyard effect this card has is absolutely nuts. You can banish it from grave to then send a level 5 or higher water monster from your deck to the graveyard, then add a water monster from your graveyard to your hand. So this literally helps you search any level 5 or higher water from deck to hand. Ice Barrier is absolutely cracked and is one of my favorite cards in the theme. Then we are on one copy of Torrential Tribute. We play this just so we can, nuke the board off of the Fury of the Kairyu Shin that we have. I'm sorry, excuse me, missed up there. 2 copies of Torrential, my mistake. I could have sworn we were playing 2. But yeah, 2 copies of Torrential. Again, we searched them off our Fury of Kairyu Shin. This just helps us break boards. And yeah, it's Torrential. Punish your opponent when they continue summoning cards. Very good against Sprite, actually. But then for the last card, we main deck. This deck is at 40 cards in the main. We are on Kairyu Shin's Dark Reef as a one-of. Pretty much you send an Umi you control to the graveyard to special summon up to 2 monsters with different names from your hand and or deck that mention Umi or are water normals. So you send Ocean, or Legendary Ocean to grave to special summon 2 water monsters from deck that mention Umi. So this card is actually very, very cool. When you can pull it off, it actually usually win those games. So 1 copy of that. Like I said, this is a 40 card main deck. And now we're going to jump into the extra deck briefly before we wrap things up here. Extra deck is just, I'm going to be honest, you really don't go into the extra deck all that much with this deck, but it's nice to have options there in case you need them, while also keeping in mind that Legendary Ocean modifies the levels of a lot of your cards. So you're going to notice that some of the monsters we're playing, you're going to think that we can't make them, but we can, because keep in mind that Legendary Ocean does reduce the level of all water monsters. So we're starting things off with number 30, Acid Golem of Destruction. It's just a generic rank 3 that we can summon that also happens to be a water attribute with a 3000 attack and defense body. Just a big beat stick if we need to go into something like this to help clear any threats our opponent might have. Is really, really cool. Then we're on 1 copy of number 47, Nightmare Shark. Again, another rank 3. This just helps facilitate a Zeus line because this card can attack directly, which is very, very cool. Then we're on 1 Abyss Dweller, again, to help stop our Tear Element matchup because they love their graveyard, so what better way to stop them than locking them out of the graveyard entirely. 1 number 27, Dreadnought Dreadnoid. This card is actually very overlooked because it has a pretty cool effect, and it can help you cheat out some very hilarious Xyz boss monsters. And it happens to also be a water attribute card, which is pretty cool. And it can protect itself from battle or destruction effects by detaching a material. Overall, a very, very good card. Then we are on the number 4 Stealth Kraken and Stealth Kraken Spawn package. These are just very strong Xyz monsters that you can make. Stealth Kraken is like a once per turn quick effect pop that doesn't target, that also deals burn damage. And then if the opponent outs the Stealth Kraken, you can special the Kraken Spawn. And then when Kraken Spawn dies, you float back into the Stealth Kraken. So it's a very annoying loop you can put your opponent in. Then the card that we summon off of our Dreadnought Dreadnoid is Super Dimensional Robot Galaxy Destroyer. This card is very hilarious. It's pretty much a Harpy's Feather Duster that your opponent can't respond to on a 5000 body. That's all I have to say about that. Then we have 1 copy of Zeus, again, because making Zeus is obviously something that's fun. And if we have the access to through Nightmare Shark, then we're going to go ahead and do that quite easily since Nightmare Shark can attack directly. Then main phase 2, make the Zeus, and then sweep the board. And then we play a couple of generic links, just 1 Nightmare Phoenix, 1 Mistar Boy, 2 copies of Iria the Water Charmer because she is very generic and also very, very good. Then we're on 1 copy of Marince's Coral Anemone, and then 2 copy, or not 2 copies, but 1 Marince's Great Bubble Reef, and then 1 Marince's Aqua Argonaut. Now these link 4s we really don't make that often. Like I said, we seldom go into our extra deck, but it's nice to have these options there. Coral Anemone being a monster reborn for waters is really nice. Great Bubble Reef gives you a draw by banishing a water, and also gets very, very big. And then you have Aqua Argonaut, who kind of lightning rods herself, meaning that your opponent can only target her for attacks, and she can quick effect bounce monsters back to your opponent's hand, which is pretty cool. But that's going to wrap up the extra deck, guys. Like I said, thank you all so much for your continued support and to the channel. Like I said, I'll continue bringing you guys really cool deck profiles, like stuff like this. Hopefully you enjoyed the Legendary Ocean Fisherman Control deck. And yeah, like I said, thank you all so much, and stay tuned for more really cool Yu-Gi-Oh content coming your way.